and get out of the way, and we'll get right to it. Greetings, children of God. Today we wish to speak on racism. This is an important topic. The first thing we want to talk about racism is to explain who and what you are. Racism is shown that because one skin color is different than another, that they are treated differently. And while there is truth to the fact, on this planet, you are treated differently. You intentionally treat each other differently. The question is, why? The first thing we want to point out, when we speak of the channel, we often call him the vehicle. This is the body that we use to come through to give a lesson. Our energy comes through and moves the body. He steps out of the way to allow that transfer to occur. Because of this, our energy can come through the vehicle and communicate with you. If we did not have access to the vehicle, then we would be in energy alone, which means, for many of you, we would not be able to express ourselves. You would not hear us. We are present, we are with you, but you do not have the capabilities to hear us. So the opportunity of using the vehicle is extremely important. It makes communication clearer. But the point still remains, we call this the vehicle. Does it matter to us what color the vehicle is? Will we only use certain types of vehicles if they're the right color? Will we avoid ones if they're the wrong color? To us, this is silly. Understand, in your world, you also have vehicles that you call cars. They are different colors. One may be black, one may be white, another may be tan, or maybe a different shade. Does that make one car better than another? And at the end of the day, aren't you going to trade that in? You don't keep that. And that is the point. When you pass, do you take your color with you? Do you assume you stand before God as a white person, a black person, a Latino, or a Chinese, Asian American? Do you think that's what created you sees? No, they don't see this at all. When you leave the body, you leave the vehicle. That is not who you are. So this absurdity of focusing on treating one person differently than another based on the color of their vehicle, when you understand your true mind, does not make sense. That being said, that doesn't change the fact that racism is alive and well. So let's talk about it. Let's not avoid it. Let's jump into the fire together. This is not the first time you have gone through this cycle. You have repeated this many times. There was 60s. There was a time before that in the 1800s. There was a Civil War. There was this time here. Constantly repeating. So what is the pattern, you may ask? Allow us to share it. It goes like this. There's a movement. Let's start with the movement, because that's what everyone focuses on, because that feels good, of finally breaking the pattern of repressing the repressors. And so picture a weed-choked garden. And these weeds have been sucking the nutrients of everything around them, and nothing gets to bloom. And finally, with a vengeance, you go to the garden and you de-weed it. You do not see a weed above the ground. And this brings peace. Because finally the repressors are gone. The problem with this thought, the problem with this process, is that it does not actually deal with the issue. You see, beneath the soil are the roots. And when the guard slips down, because finally the job is done, I see the open field, there's no more weeds, I can relax and I can be. And I can have freedom, and flowers bloom, and it takes off. And then after a certain amount of time, the roots begin to grow, and up sprouts new weeds. And then becomes the argument of logic. Oh, well, there's just a few leaves. Look at how tall and beautiful the flowers are. There's nothing to worry about. Oh, it's grown taller. It's not as tall as a flower. Everything is fine. We're good. Oh, it's the same size as the flower. Oh, but look at the beautiness of the flower. You can still see those bright colors among the weeds. It's really not that bad, is it? Until finally the weed bed overgrows the flowers and begins to choke them out again. And that's where we find ourselves now. The movement. The movement to make change. The problem is that as children of God, you are not focusing on the actual problem. Allow us to back up and explain this to you. Racism is a reaction to a different problem. And right now, everyone looks at it as, this is the problem. If it wasn't for racism, I would be free. But the truth of the matter is, it keeps growing back, does it not? It's very much a circle, is it not? It continues happening. Do you really want to cut down the weed forest now to make it clear for flowers to grow again, only have 2 generations from now to suffer as you're suffering? What's the point? Why would you allow that? The point here is to stop the cycle. So, what is the cycle? The issue of racism is not racism. The issue of racism and the cause of it is separation. Allow us to explain. Imagine a lake, which is your mind. It is calm. It is clear. And from that lake, you can see a clear reflection of the sky above. You are in full perception of what's around you. Something hits the water and disturbs the image. That's racism. However, separation through the rock. That is what we want to bring to your attention. The reason why we say racism is the reaction to the actual problem is because you can't have racism without believing in separation. You are all God's children. This has been said in so many ways, in so many tongues, and it is so easily forgotten. Sure, it's mimicked in church on Sunday, but when it comes down to the daily application in life, that is not how you act, and it is not what you believe. And your world is a reflection of that. And in this, we're not talking about the individual, we're talking about the mass. The minds at mass. No, not at church. The minds at mass within the energy of Earth. Your world is a reflection of all the rocks being thrown into the clearness of your mind. And what is being thrown is the idea of separation. The only way that someone can see someone as less than, someone can see someone's pain as greater than, someone can go ahead and see that they need something that the other has, is because they are separate. Imagine for a moment if you can get 2 people in the same room that have extreme ideologies of racism against each other. Now imagine if you can strip that from your mind and replace that separation with an understanding of the connectionness that God made. That feeling of harmony, that feeling of bliss, that feeling of completeness. Now we ask you to imagine them looking at each other in racist tones. How could they? So understand, what humanity is suffering from is not racism. They're suffering physically from the painfulness of the reaction, yes. But the actual suffering is separation. It always has been, it always was, and it always will be until you change your minds on the subject, until you approach each other that you are not separate, but you are the same family under God, or get rid of God. It doesn't require your belief. So get rid of God if that is offensive to you. It's not required to believe the connectedness between your brothers and sisters. You're all on this planet together. And at the end of your journey, when you die, you don't take your color with you. What you do take is your pain from that color. This is important. You identify with that pain. You identify as that pain. You are stuck in a silent scream and you can't let it go. Now here's what's to understand. You are on the other side, spirit in energy form. And you can't let go of this emotional pain. Which means the idea of staying where you are is not going to happen, because your mind is still pulling you to a physical experience. What you create through your attention and your willpower is what you manifest physically. So in you go, and in you go to life. There's many opportunities there for expression. Do you want to be Latino? Do you want to be white? Do you want to be Asian American? Do you want to be black? Oh, but you really don't have a choice, because your pain is so intense, it pulls you back to where you started from. And you start again. And depending on where the cycle is for racism, oh, woe is you if you come back in at its peak, where it's at its worst. It intensifies and doubles the pain. It makes it worse. So what do you identify more as? More of this. Less of this, which would be children of God. And round you go through your cycles of karma. Constantly throwing rocks at the water. Believing in separation. And being stuck in your pain. That, quite frankly, is almost too much to bear. Do you really need to carry this any further? Are you ready to get rid of the roots so the weeds do not grow back? Are you seriously ready to look at the beauty of the flowers and what is possible on this planet? Then we will say, personally, for yourself, look at your thoughts of separation. Before the idea of racism took form and gave you a valid reason why it exists, the first emotional impulse was separation. You then used your brain to justify why, like a lawyer fine-tuning an argument for court. The issue is separation. And my peace to you. Okay. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed that.